I got married at 24. My husband was 10 years older than me, and I think that dynamic in the relationship when you're that young, it kind of felt to me like he was almost the adult in the relationship, and I deferred a lot of decisions around money to him, even though I was the accountant and he wasn't in that industry. I remember actually being quite just demoralized by it at one point and actually taking a sick day off work. And I spent that day on the couch in my pajamas, tracking and coding, like categorizing all of the bank statements for the last year. And then him coming home and saying, look, this is horrible. Look at this. We've spent everything and look how much we spend in cafe and that kind of stuff. And he just was not interested.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm Bill Yount with Jackie Cummins-Koski, and we have a special treat for you today, right, Jackie?
That is right. We are going to be on a trip down under to New Zealand, and we're going to go straight into the heart of Kiwi FIRE.
Our guest today is Bronwyn Candish. She, by day, is a chartered accountant with Shepherd and Ormsby, a comprehensive accounting firm owned and run by women, supporting small businesses and investors. By night, however, she's also one of New Zealand's most energetic voices in financial independence, Retire Early, the FIRE movement.
Yeah, and while she works with Kiwis, and that's what we call people from New Zealand, the money principles that she teaches is universal. So in this conversation, Bronwyn, she's going to open up about her FIRE journey, like the wins, the setbacks, the numbers, and the mindset shifts that changed everything. And she also shares what she's learned from coaching other people to reach FIRE. And also how she's spreading her message across New Zealand while drawing on inspiration from larger FI communities like we have right here in the U.S.
If you've ever wondered what FI looks like from another corner of the globe, you're in for a real treat. Bronwyn, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We first met a while back because it's something we're going to talk about that you're going to do. But before we come up to the present, I think we got to roll it back to the past because you've had an interesting journey getting to the point you are in both your business, your personal life, and in your extracurricular life. Take us back to your origin story with money for us, please.
Yeah. Gosh, it goes right back, doesn't it? You're trying to think of like earliest memories and that kind of thing. And I'm the product of two beneficiaries. So here in New Zealand, we have quite an intense social welfare system. And both of my parents from long stretches of my childhood were beneficiaries. And that meant that we lived on extremely tight budgets and we were always paycheck to paycheck and always quite good budgeters. But there was never any more money to be had. And then when I became a chartered accountant, I'd always wanted to be an accountant. I decided when I was 15 or something, really quite young, that it was what I was going to do. And people think when you're an accountant, you sort of know this stuff and that you're really good with numbers and your own finances. And that's simply just not the case in all examples. It's kind of that old adage of the plumber's house or the builder's own home falling down around them. It was a little bit like that for me.
Oh my goodness. There's got to be some stories there, Jackie, right? So her firehouse is falling down around her. We got to get into that.
It reminds me of myself a little bit. I'm always curious about the differences in another country like New Zealand and the U.S. So for both of your parents, were they professional people that had college degrees, or are you a first generation college?
So I'm the first generation college in my family. Even in the grandchildren, I think there's only one other of my cousins who's done that. I'm pretty sure the others haven't. I've got two brothers. My next youngest brother is very well qualified in the automotive mechanical industry, and he's got a fantastic career, but not a college education.
Your education really must have started in the family. It sounds your parents were of relatively small means. How did that affect you as a kid? Did you feel like you were living a life of scarcity, or was it okay?
Yeah, a little. I'll be clear, we were never starving or anything like that, but we also didn't have the shiny baubles or some of the stuff that my friends had. My parents were big thrift shoppers. You guys call it here, we call it op shopping, like opportunity shopping here in New Zealand. So most of my clothes came from the op shops. A lot of our furniture was secondhand. And I remember comparing myself to my friends who were going on big vacations with their family every summer and that type of stuff. And we just didn't have that level of money around. But I think it really did instill quite an entrepreneurial spirit quite young, and the same for my brother as well, actually. We were always sort of looking for ways to have some more money, and we were quite independently minded that we were going to do it ourselves, we were going to figure it out. So I remember being quite young and always being a massive reader and getting books out of the library for business ideas for kids and stuff like that, and always trying to think of something. But it was always trying to get rich quick kind of situations that never pan out when you're 8 years old, right?
Bronwyn, thank you for giving us the difference in the two terms, because I know there's a certain dialect or certain words and terminology that you guys use that are different. So I may pop in and say, now, what does that mean? The main one is the Kiwi that I said in the introduction. So when you're from New Zealand, you are a Kiwi.
Which is a reference to the bird, not the fruit, right?
Okay, a reference to the bird, not the fruit. I got you. So kiwi is a bird. All right. I wonder if they have those in the U.S. Do you know, Bill? I don't know if I've ever seen a kiwi bird.
No, I have no idea. We're going to find out, Jackie, because we're going down under. And Bronwyn is doing something that we get to be a part of. But let's keep that as a surprise for a little bit later. You've talked a little bit about your money history with your family, but you mentioned, and I caught it, that you made some mistakes in spite of being an accountant. You said your house was falling down around you. What happened? What were some of the mistakes that happened in your life with money?
I made some great decisions as well, but then I think the big things were just set up wrong. I always talk about those big three pillars: transport, accommodation, food, and man, we had that a bit wrong. So I got married at 24. My husband was 10 years older than me, and I think that dynamic in the relationship when you're that young, it kind of felt to me like he was almost the adult in the relationship, and I deferred a lot of decisions around money to him, even though I was the accountant and he wasn't in that industry. But you sort of trust that person who's older and wiser, hopefully, to make some of those decisions. And I think one of the biggest ones that we did was we made that classic mistake, and it's a big thing here in New Zealand. Property ownership and home ownership is a really big deal. Alternatives like renting as a long-term plan is frowned upon here and kind of second tier. And when we went to buy our first home together, we just absolutely maxed out what we could afford, right? So instead of looking at doing a budget and what we could afford, building in a buffer, we bought the biggest, fanciest, most expensive house that the bank would let us buy at a time where interest rates were quite low. In classic experience, interest rates, I think it was 2 or 3 years, had doubled, and we were really struggling just to have any disposable income because we'd maxed ourselves out so much on that.
And we certainly see a lot of that in the U.S.
Yeah, I can relate to being house poor. I did that, been there, done that with the big fancy house and the big mortgage that left no gap. So I feel your pain.
So I'm curious about the interest rate. How does it work in New Zealand in terms of mortgages? Did you have a variable rate?
Yeah, here we do it a little differently to you guys. I understand over there you can get some really long term, so your interest rates are locked in for a long period of time. Here in New Zealand, most mortgages are 25 or even 30 years in duration, but the interest for that time is usually fixed in smaller increments. So most people would fix their mortgage for a rate anywhere between 6 months or a year through to 5 years. It's really common to just fix for 2 years. And then when that rolls over 2 years from now, you'll get whatever the market rate is then, and you refix it at that point and you keep rolling through. So even though you're going to have this mortgage for 20, 25 years, you've got this interest rate negotiation going on every couple of years.
Wow. It sounds like the default and the standard is a variable rate that only goes on for 2 years or maybe a little bit longer. Oh, so that's interesting because you're right. In the U.S., most people go for a 30-year fix is probably the most common in the U.S.
I remember visiting with my father. I brought my house, I think it was in the October or November of that year. My dad was living in Charlotte in North Carolina, and I came out to spend the summer with him. And I think his mortgage was fixed for 20 years and it was 2 point something, and mine was fixed for 2 years and it was 5. And I was just gobsmacked. I'm like, how come you can get it so low? This is amazing. It's just a different setup.
So did you end up in paycheck to paycheck, hedonic treadmill lifestyle?
Absolutely, right. So when I first moved in with my husband, I was a college student. I was still finishing my degree and he was working full time. And back then, I think his income was maybe 50K a year, which at that stage I was like, oh my gosh, that's so much money. I thought it was amazing. I was on 33,000 in my first accounting role as a graduate. So getting my first job right through to becoming fully qualified and getting my first junior partnership in accounting practice, we just did that classic example of lifestyle creep, right? And we just continued to live the high life. And we were quite foodie sort of people. So it was lots of restaurants and lots of eating out and that kind of thing.
So when you are saying 50,000, that's 50,000 New Zealand. What's the currency in New Zealand?
Dollars, yeah.
Dollars in New Zealand. Okay. And did I do this right? So I put in 50,000 New Zealand and it says that it's $28,700 US. That sounds about right?
Yeah, it's usually around half-ish, sort of around there, right?
Okay. I just want our listeners to know what the conversion rate is. Now, you mentioned that you were finishing up college when you got married. So the question I have is, how does New Zealand do college? That's a big issue, and there's a lot of new things going on with paying for college in our part of the world, in the U.S. Did you have student loan debt?
Yeah, it's quite different here. We do have to pay for university, but it's nowhere near the types of prices I hear on podcasts for the States. It's been a while now since I had to do it myself, but back then I was spending sort of between $5,000, maybe $8,000 a year on the tuition, and the rest of that is supported by the government. So that's the cost to the student. And we have a student loan program which is centralised through the government, so it's all done through IRD, which I guess you guys call IRS. So the repayments for the student loans are taken direct from your wages like your income taxes and comes out once you reach that threshold. So at the time, things are changing a little bit. Successive governments tinker and change the rules. But at the time that I was a student, it was interest-free while I was in New Zealand. And so it was sort of a carrot dangled to keep Kiwis here. It's a very popular move to finish your university education and then head off on your big, we call it the OE. So you head off on your big OE, your overseas experience, often to London because we're a Commonwealth country and we have visa stuff with them and you can work there for 2 years quite easily as a young person. And so the scheme was to charge interest on those student loans if you left the country, and if you stayed, then it was interest-free while you paid them off.
That's interesting. Student loans are seen just like a tax. It's federally run and governed. It's federally supported. It's relatively cost-effective.
It's very clear. Like, I've listened to a lot of Dave Ramsey and I've heard some real horror stories of people trying to find these student loans to be able to pay them and things like that. And we just don't have that problem here because it's centralized.
So now, did you also say it was a zero interest rate as long as you remain in New Zealand?
Yeah.
You hear that, Bill?
Yeah, that's just not conceivable here in the U.S.
It's changing here. It's not quite as good. You still can get sometime interest-free, but the rules are tightening a little here as well. But this was 20-odd years ago. And so whilst my family had no savings to put me through college, we call it university, but same thing, my parents had no plan and no ability to help me out with that. But because of the student loan process, I was able to take care of it myself.
Did you have a big loan burden and debt burden when you came out of school? Did you get into a debt crisis, for example?
I actually lucked out. My program was a 4-year degree for chartered accountancy, and I got a full-time job after year 2, and my employer actually paid the rest of my tuition. So my 3rd and 4th year, he covered the cost of my tuition, which was a fantastic outcome for me. So I only had the student loan for those 2 years instead of 4 years. Although, to be honest, I took the 4th year tuition check that he gave me, used it to pay for the wedding, and we got the interest-free loan to cover the tuition. So we played the game a little bit.
As far as the student loans, is there any type of ways that you can pay for it based on your income? Because in the U.S., payment plans that's based on how much you make is pretty common. We've got something called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness and things like that. So do you guys have anything similar?
It's kind of means tested or income tested to a point. So you don't need to make repayments on your student loan until your income is, well, back then, I'm not sure what it is now, it was $18,000 a year. And then they would take a repayment of 10%, so 10% of my gross income from that 18,000 upwards. And so, yeah, each paycheck they would take there. But if your income did drop down below the 18, then you weren't making any repayments that year.
Wow, that sounds like a much cleaner process than what we have going on.
It seems much more straightforward to me, yeah.
Yeah, maybe my send my kids to college in New Zealand.
Just to recap, so you get through childhood, didn't grow up in a fancy place, parents struggled, you go through college. Before you finish college, you got married. So now you and your husband, you got the mortgage, you got the house that you can't really afford. But what happens next with you and your husband? I'm assuming you graduated, started your career. Take us from there.
Yeah, so the next thing is divorce, right? And so we were married for 10 years, but we had the mortgage. We both were building our careers. We decided to move from Palmerston North, which is in the central North Island, to Christchurch, which is central South Island. And so we made that move down here to buy a couple of businesses. So my husband at the time was working for the franchise head of a chain of retail stores here in New Zealand, and the opportunity came to buy a couple of the branches. So we decided to move to Christchurch. That was sort of my OE experience, I guess. I was like, oh, I didn't get to do the OE thing because my husband had a daughter who was very young when we first got married. And so when she went off to university herself, it was like, oh, it's time for me to have a bit of an adventure. And so we headed down here to Christchurch. Unfortunately, we were only here together for about 12 months before we separated. And so that was a big wake-up call for me, because I realised then that I couldn't sort of defer the financial decisions to him. I just sat there with the cheque for half. And so we'd had really good incomes, especially compared to what I was used to growing up. I thought that we were actually quite well off and we had this fantastic lifestyle. But when I saw it all laid out on paper, once we divvied everything up and I got my half and my share of everything, it was barely enough to go and put the deposit down on another house. And I just had this kind of moment of realization, I guess, that I wasn't doing money very well. It wasn't working. And I was especially disheartened because I'd always had an interest in it. Like, I knew about compound interest. I'd read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was in university, those kinds of things. And I just have deferred too much of this to somebody else and I haven't taken control of my own destiny here.
So you were in your early 30s at this point, married 10 years, and essentially you're starting from scratch with the down payment on the house and a negative net worth, I would imagine.
Yeah, a positive net worth in that you use it for the deposit on the house and then you hope that that doesn't go anywhere, right? I think I was 37 or 38, something like that at the time, and it was kind of scary to embark on that next stage alone and to do that without the support of someone or to have conversations with and to check in with, are we doing this right? Are we doing this together? It was on my own for a bit.
Yeah, divorce is a really hard time. When I got divorced, I was in my early to mid 30s, and that's a huge wake-up call. So since you were an accountant doing a net worth statement for your household, and it sounded like you deferred most of it to your husband, but I'm just curious, did you even know any of those really important numbers that you obviously know now?
I was actually tracking pretty much the whole time. It's just that we didn't really do anything with the data that we had. And so I would get a little bit nervous about money. I thought that we could be saving more. To be fair, we did pay extra payments on the mortgage, but we didn't have an emergency fund, any kind of buffer. And so if something came up, we were credit card users. And this makes me feel sick, but probably had about 10 or 15K worth of credit card debt at any point in time, right? And you just sort of be quite like about it because you think, well, your next paycheck will, that sort of thing. And I wouldn't say that we were extremely extravagant people, but we were very much like, well, if I want, I'll just put it on the credit card. It's fine. And we didn't really have the conversations. I remember being really angry with him one day when he went out and brought a new bike and it was $2,500 and I just get home and there's a bike in the garage, right? And you sort of think, we should have conversations. There should be a limit about how much you can spend without the other person knowing, but we just never had that kind of conversation. I remember actually being quite just demoralized by it at one point and actually taking a sick day off work. And I spent that day on the couch in my pajamas, tracking and coding, like categorizing all of the bank statements for the last year, and then him coming home and saying, look, this is horrible. Look at this. We've spent everything and look how much we spend in cafe and that kind of stuff. And he just was not interested. To be fair, he'd been orphaned quite young, and I think in reality he didn't believe he was going to live long enough to enjoy a retirement, and so he was like, whatever, we just live now, we enjoy our life now. And it didn't sit well with me. It made me extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like your values weren't aligned. You weren't on the same page with regards to marriage as a business, and it sounds like it was pretty distressing. And that happened to my mother, and I lived it as well. Women in general get the short end of the stick, often in divorce. Did you feel that was the case for you? And then what did you do to begin your recovery?
I was very lucky in that the divorce law here is really clear and the default is 50-50, and it does tend to favour 50-50 in almost any circumstance, right? And so it was fair. I'd recently got a new job in an accounting practice in Christchurch, and I had a female boss for the first time in a long time. And I remember talking to her about the process and just getting her to cast an eye over the numbers and to tell me whether we were doing this right as far as the divorce goes and working out the amounts. And I remember her saying to me, we want you to be bothly just ever so slightly both pissed off, right? We don't want one of you to be super angry and devastated and the other one to be stoked and happy. We just want both of you to be ever so slightly pissed, and then we know that we've got the balance right. And so I thought that that was an interesting approach, and it's something that I've talked to my clients, and they've unfortunately faced divorce themselves. But I felt like we were there, at least in my mind. I hope he would agree. It was a very fair, straight down the middle sort of situation.
So both the debt and any assets was split down the middle. Okay. And did you have any kids at the time of your divorce?
So we didn't have any children together, no. We had my stepdaughter, who at the time she was almost 20 or she was 19 or something. And so she was living on her own, but we didn't have children together. So I guess it sort of makes it simpler if that's ever a thing, but yeah.
So you were in your 30s. A lot of folks who feel like they're starting late. Did you feel like you were starting late? How did that feel? And then what actions did you take mentally and financially to get the snowball rolling in a different direction?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely was proud of the couple of good decisions that I had made. One of those, we actually both had signed up to KiwiSaver here in New Zealand right from when that started. So that came in the early 2000s. So that's a government pension scheme, and that's a deduction straight from your wages. And so that was relatively new to New Zealand, and we signed up as soon as it was available. And so being in that for over 10 years or so by the time we divorced, we both had some money there. I went on to use mine. They have this thing here called a second chance loan, and you're able to draw some of that down as a second chance to buy a house. And exactly my situation, if you had owned a home before, but you'd been through a divorce and now you don't own a home anymore, because he ended up taking the home as part of the settlement. So I took more cash and he took dismal equity that was available in the home. And then I used my KiwiSaver as part of my deposit to buy my house going forward.
Gotcha. So for us, employer workplace plan, which would be similar to the KiwiSaver, would be a 401k, 403b, or something like that. So you basically borrowed against the KiwiSaver to put the down payment on your new house.
I actually drew it out. Yeah. So they actually allow you. So the KiwiSaver is made up of 3 tranches. You've got a government contribution, which is pretty minimal. I think at the time it was like $1,000 or something like that. And then you have an employer contribution, and then your employee contribution, so your contribution yourself, and often your employer will match what you put in. It's usually around that 3 to 4% sort of mark. So there's big talk here in New Zealand about that being inadequate and not being enough. We look to our friends across in Australia and they're putting 12% in and we're only putting 4 or something. So I think there's definitely room for improvement there. And that scheme actually allowed me to draw it out. I pretty much took out everything I could. And so whilst I was in a better position because I had built that up, I pretty quickly destroyed it. So I was literally starting from scratch.
Now, how do you feel about that you withdrew money in your retirement account? You feel different about it today than you did?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. It's a real catch-22 because as the timing worked out when I actually did buy a home, so I rented for a while and I met the partner that I'm with now, Mike, and by the time it came to actually settle down and buy a house, it was a few years later. And so I was sort of lucky in that I bought it in October before we went into COVID in the March. And so the house prices skyrocketed through that COVID time here in New Zealand. And because at the time as well, Mike's Canadian, and at that stage, it was really me buying the house because he didn't have the right visas and he couldn't own property here in New Zealand. And so I was doing it all on my own income for the mortgage application and all of that kind of thing. And I think if we had waited until after that COVID boom, we probably wouldn't have been able to get into the housing market in the way that we have. So it's a real bittersweet conversation because now I understand so much more about FIRE and that movement. I would never take any money out of my retirement funds, but it's been a means to an end as well.
Yeah, I want to hear about when you found the FIVE movement because it's a bit fledgling in New Zealand and you're one of the superpowers there along with Ruth Henderson. Happy saver. When did you find it, and what did it feel like to find it?
It was around the time of the divorce. I was looking for information. I had that kind of sinking feeling that I was doing money wrong and that there was so much that I could do better, but I didn't know what the right thing to do was. And when I was newly divorced, I had this idea that I might become a bit of a digital nomad. And I sort of thought, well, here's my chance. I'm free, fancy free, right? I can take off around the world and I could live anywhere. And I was reading a lot of articles online and about how that could work. And there was a guy here in New Zealand by the name of Richard who wrote for Stuff, which is a popular newspaper website here. And he wrote a lot of articles on Stuff about how to be a digital nomad and his experience. He was traveling at the time. And sort of almost throwaway comment at the bottom of one of his articles was this thing about, oh, it looks like I'm just tuning into the FIRE movement. I think I've accidentally become one of the FIRE people. And I was like, what is this FIRE thing? What? Googled that up and down the rabbit hole I went, right? And just became obsessed. I think at the time I was looking for a framework and a guideline. I was like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And this gave me the framework to work with.
Yeah, and did you find a lot of information in New Zealand proper? Had the movement moved into New Zealand, or was it relatively new and it was all outside?
Yeah, so it was a lot of American content at the time. I found the Choose Your Fire podcast. That was where I sort of first started. And I don't think that was even very old in itself. I don't think it had been going that long when I kind of stumbled across it. But I did really struggle to find Kiwi relatable content. Ruth was sort of in those fledgling stages then as well. I always say that we take the simple path to wealth, but Ruth is the person who gives you how to do that in New Zealand. And also there's the Barefoot Investor over in Australia. And so that's probably the next closest thing to New Zealand, even though there are some differences. And so his content was really popular. He had a couple of books out, but his books were quite new at the time and they were very popular. So I started there.
So the closest, largest country, I guess, to you guys would be Australia. And they had a decent sized FIRE community.
It's still small compared to America, but it's much bigger than New Zealand's, yeah.
Why do you think it's so small in New Zealand? Are you guys weirdos that just go against the flow like we feel in the States? It must be if it's a small community.
You know, remember, we've only got a population of 5 million, right? And to steal Grumpus Maximus's phrase, we're the financial mutants. So we're the 1% of mutant people in what's already a small population. So yeah, it was harder. And I think part of the reason we'll get to soon about Black Friday and about the Choose Your Fire meetups and those kind of things is that I was looking to build community. I'd heard that quote of you are the sum of the 5 people you most spend your time with. And I looked at my broke mates and thought, I need new friends, you know, and I need to start building this community around me.
So if it doesn't exist for you, you have to make it, basically, right, Jackie?
And you're doing it. And that's why we are even having this conversation today. So as far as U.S. people, you mentioned Choose FI, you mentioned J.L. Collins, Simple Path to Wealth. Because to me, this means you're pretty big when you're going global and you've got people from other countries listening to you. Any other podcasts, books, or resources that you as a New Zealander found very helpful, even though the content was created in the U.S.?
So I found the Catching Up to FIRE documentary, like pretty much watched that as soon as it came out. And that was actually a really good starter for some of our first meetup. I actually started the Choose Your Fire meetup here in Christchurch because I'd read on their website that if you had a local meetup, then they would do a screening of the movie in your city. And I was like, oh, great. And so I signed up to do that. And then they came back to me and said, oh, sorry, you're in New Zealand. We just meant that for Americans. Sorry. But by then I had the group. And so we did one of our first meetups. One of the ladies in the group hosted us at her house and we all sat on her living room floor and watched it on her TV, right? And so that was sort of the early days of the content. But I listened to, I think it was Millennial Revolution as well. They were doing podcasts at the time and I kind of just had that thirst for knowledge. And I guess for me at that time too, it was the first time I'd really listened to a podcast. And so I was always walking around with my headphones on and trying to get as much as possible.
Is it a strange thing to retire early in New Zealand? Does everybody have the mindset of the boomer where we're going to work 40 years, 9 to 5, and we'll retire on KiwiSaver at the time? And is it really counterculture to exit the system sooner?
I think it is, right? At least in the cross section of clients that I've worked with, for example, in my accounting practice, when I try to talk to people about this stuff, I often get exactly that sort of like, well, why? I love my job. And I think New Zealand in general does have a problem with financial literacy, as a lot of countries do, that we're not taught this stuff at school yet. It's actually been passed into law just this year so that they'll start financial literacy programs as a compulsory subject in schools in New Zealand starting this year. But up until that, it hadn't been compulsory. And so sometimes you would get some coaching or teaching from your teacher. I actually had an accounting teacher at high school who sat us all down and tried to talk to us about this sort of stuff. But she was focused on how to get a good credit rating and how to get into debt, that kind of thing. And so it's just an interesting difference in mindset. But here in New Zealand, we have a government super, we call it the super, and that is a benefit that everybody gets regardless of income or wealth. But that is capped at a rate that they set each year, which this year is around about 25,000. And so if you have no preparation at all and you just retire with, maybe you live in a house, but that's it, no income, then the government will pay you that super regardless of your circumstances. But for most people, that's not going to be enough. And now that we're getting through that baby boomer stage, there's been a lot of talk, to be fair, for a long time about whether that product is sustainable in New Zealand and whether they might raise the age. It's currently 65, whether they'll raise it to 67. And so I think a lot of people in the New Zealand FIRE movement pretty much discount that and just assume that they're not going to get it and treat it as a bit of an icing on the cake or a bit of a bonus if they do get it once they reach that age.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to Social Security in the United States, which we've got to do some fixes to that system. So typical retirement age in New Zealand is 65?
Correct, yeah. Well, that's the government super age. So most people will wait until they receive that super and then retire for that. So yeah, so 65 is very common. And it's common to see people work past that as well.
It seems like your divorce launched you in, like you said, down the rabbit hole, not only with your personal finances, but with your business. You became on fire with accounting. Tell us a little bit about your business trajectory.
So I decided pretty early on in finding the FIRE movement that I wanted to do this for work. I liked it. I loved it so much and it made so much sense to me that I felt the need to spread the fire, right, and spread the word. Ironically, my husband and I had been seeing a financial coach. I wouldn't say they were a financial planner, probably in the way that you understand them, but there's a company here in New Zealand that call themselves personal financial trainers. And so they had been helping us because I'd had my concerns. They'd been helping us with a budget. And so they basically help you set a budget, help you keep accountable and track to that, and then also consult with you about how to best pay off your mortgage as quickly as possible. It's a 12-month coaching program, and we were only sort of halfway through that coaching program when we separated. And I ended up reaching out to my coach after everything had sort of settled down and said, hey, I'm really getting into this stuff, and can I have a chat to you about what it's like to become a financial advisor in New Zealand? And she actually ended up offering me a job, and so I worked there as a personal financial coach, not for very long because I ended up getting pregnant with my son, Ethan. So I was probably only working there for maybe a year, not even that. But that actually tied in really nicely with some budget coaching that ironically I'd been coaching other people when I was an early grad and in the end of my university. I'd been helping people who didn't have enough to budget and to kind of tighten up their expenses. And so that played on that volunteer service that I'd been doing and then a bit of professional advice as well. And then when I decided after my son was born, I wanted to step back into traditional accounting, I took that knowledge and that mindset with me and I started to sort of apply it to conversations in the boardroom with my clients. I sort of felt, I had this almost epiphany where I was like, the whole point of businesses, it doesn't really matter what business you have or even if it's rentals or commercial properties. The whole point of this at the end of the day is to retire confidently and comfortably. And so if we're not having conversations about that, if you're not having a chat with your accountant about that, then who's left to talk to? Most Kiwis don't have a financial advisor that they're having these conversations with. Most of them are doing it alone. We've got a very strong DIY culture here in New Zealand. We will build our own house if you let us, and so people are trying to do the same thing with their finances.
I would say that's very similar, at least the FIRE community here in the U.S. A lot of do-it-yourselfers, most of them probably don't have a financial planner. So today you have your own firm. So when did you make that shift from employee to starting your own business?
Yeah, so I'd been self-employed for quite some time, even when we were still back in Palmerston North and before coming down to Christchurch. I was working at home in my pajamas and to be fair, was doing the bare minimum, right? And so I would just sort of do enough billable hours for the day and then carry on sort of thing. When COVID happened and we had all of that situation, our son was 6 weeks old when New Zealand went into the lockdown in March 2020. We pivoted, as everybody does. Mike's job basically evaporated overnight. He was working in the tourism industry. And so I thought, okay, well, it looks like it's me, right? I'll be the breadwinner. And debt was very cheap at that stage. We can talk about that later. But we started to look around for an accounting practice to buy. I basically wasn't sort of patient enough to build what I was doing already into more and enough to sustain a whole family. So we decided that we would buy an existing accounting practice and launch that a bit faster. And so it took us a while to find that practice, and it wasn't until February 2022 that we actually purchased it. But I've been running it for 4 years now since then.
Yeah, but it's not just accounting now. You're evolving into a financial planner of sorts for the FIRE community. What's that evolution like?
Those constant conversations. So every client will sit down with them and I'll say, right, here's your tax for the year, here's your accounts for the business, here's how you're going, here's your profit for the year. Just while I'm here, what about the future? And just starting to have those conversations, because most of them have never had that conversation with their accountant before. Accountants are notorious for looking backwards rather than looking forwards. And so I decided that we were going to spend 10 minutes looking backwards and the rest of the meeting talking about the future. And so we've integrated that into the culture of the practice, if you like. My team, whether they wanted to get on board or not, they're on board. We've put them through Rebel Finance School and make them do the classes. And it's actually been fantastic to see the way that their financial literacy has evolved and the decisions that they're making in their personal lives. It's fantastic. I had a team member who emailed me and said, I'm just letting you know that I'm giving you my 10.7 year notice of resignation because I'm going to retire in 10.7 years. I'm like, okay, great.
Love it. I love it. A letter of resignation 10 years in advance. Never heard that one.
Yeah, it was a very proud moment.
So you've gone through the Donegans. We love the Donegans. They've been on the show several times, and they do a free Rebel Finance School in the summer. So you've gone through that. So they touch so many people all over the world.
Yeah, and Kiwis are massively overrepresented in the watches of the Rebel Finance School. They had 3,000 Kiwis watching last year. So to give you an idea, when they do their tax weeks, they'll do the UK tax because they're Brits, and then they've got a US tax week and then New Zealand tax week. Right. And so we're punching in the top 3 of the people who are following along with Rebel Finance School. And that's mostly due to Ruth, to be fair, because she's been plugging it for a while. She saw the need for it and she's been plugging it for ages.
The Donegans also did a New Zealand tour. They called it the Great Pie Tour. Why do they call it the Great Pie Tour?
We have a product here that's called a pie. It's a portfolio investment entity, a thing that you can invest through, and the taxes within it sort of take care of themselves. So it's almost like a PAYE, like a pay-as-you-go investment product, and it's quite unique to New Zealand. And when they heard about that, they were like, oh, amazing. And we also have this culture of meat pies in New Zealand. So it's my Canadian partner's one of his favourite things about this country is that we put meat into pies, into pastry, right? And so the Donegans decided that they were going to travel around New Zealand. They would try different pies in different cities. It's a very Kiwi thing to do. We should do that while you're here.
Oh, I'm down for it. How about you, Bill?
Oh, absolutely. You said while we're there. Now, what's interesting is catching up to FI, because we were on the Rebel Finance School, all of a sudden got a few New Zealand fans. And lo and behold, out of the blue, you reached out to us about something. You better let the cat out of the bag on this one.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm so lucky to be here in New Zealand because New Zealand sells itself, right? And so I took a punt and I sent a few emails out and I just said, hey, is New Zealand on your bucket list? Have you ever wanted to come down here? Because I can give you a reason. And we decided that we would do some events here. And so our events here started with what we call Black Friday. That was based on a bit of a play of words with Black Friday. I am watching what was going on with CampFI in the States, and I'd actually reached out to Stephen and said, oh man, I love what you're doing. I really want to come, but at that stage the world was in lockdown and I couldn't get there. And he said, why don't you just run one at home? And he was so helpful and such an inspiration to get that started. So we ran our first one. I remember being in the planning stages and I was working in my home office trying to visualize what this event might look like. And I was just being constantly bombarded by these ads on the radio for the Black Friday sales. It's kind of weird because it's not a thing here. We don't have Thanksgiving, and up until a few years ago, we didn't have Black Friday or Cyber Monday or any of that kind of thing. As part of that culture that we've sort of taken on board, that's not really true to us. And I was feeling quite frustrated with that, and I decided that I wanted to basically go camping that weekend and get away from everybody and the madness because the malls are crazy and the roads are crazy and the people are crazy. I was like, I'm going bush, right? I'm going to go into the wilderness. And I thought, well, who should I invite? Who do I want to hang out with? I'm like, the FIRE people, right? They're the only people who get it. They're the ones who are not at the mall spending all their money on their credit card. And so that's where the concept came from, is that we would do it as a bit of an anti-Black Friday celebration in the style of CampFI. We've run that for 2 years so far. I was super lucky that in that first year in 2024, Alan and Katie, I'd heard that they were coming to New Zealand. We'd done Rebel Finance School in the July beforehand, and I reached out to Alan, I think it was on LinkedIn or something, and just said, hey, I hear you're coming to New Zealand. Do you want to come to my event? And in true Donegan fashion, they said, sure, and the rest was history.
I love it.
If I remember correctly, your husband may not have been completely on board with this stuff initially. And it sounds like there was a transformation that occurred because you had been with your first husband. You weren't on the same page about money, and this was happening again. How did you get him to come along for the party?
Yeah, the Donegans did it. Yeah. I mean, I met him around the same time as I was starting to obsess about this FIRE stuff. And so it was always part of the conversation. And I think we've been closer as far as sharing the same values and being on the same page with money. But he was also very much like, but it's your thing though, you're really into this. Whilst he never was a handbrake or went against the things that I wanted to do, he was also not excited about it either. He was like, whatever, that's your thing, you do that, and I'm just along for the ride. It was funny, I actually got him to come to Black Friday, the first one, because the Donegans were there, and some people who were following the Donegans who were like, oh, we're just going to come to Black Friday and like, we'll see you there. And I was kind of a bit freaked out, and I'm like, this is a ticketed event, people have paid money, you can't just show up. And so I said to Mike, you're coming. He wasn't going to, but I said, you're coming. You're going to be my bodyguard and you're going to be our bouncer and sit at the door. And if anybody shows up without a ticket, then you're there to, because I'm not having that conversation. Us Kiwis don't do confrontation. And so he came, thankfully, to the event and he drank the Kool-Aid. He got on board. He listened to the speakers. So Ruth and the Donegans were our speakers. And we had some case studies. I think we had 3 or 4 participants, which is really brave first year up when this hasn't been done before in New Zealand. So he, joined in on the weekend, met some awesome people, and we left the Black Friday event. We were doing a big road trip to the very top of North Island for Christmas after that, and we hopped in the car afterwards and he said, would you like to listen to Alan's podcast? And I was like, who is this person? It was just amazing. So we've just been like much more on the same page together since then, which has been incredible.
I'm so glad for you there, but I just love the community aspect of the FIRE world or FIRE, and we are definitely spreading our wings and looking at some global stuff. I went to the FIRE Freedom Retreat in Bali, same type of vibe. So when you invited us, I was so thrilled. I've never been to New Zealand. And then your energy and everything and where you're at and your FIRE journey, we had a lot of very similar experiences through life. So this is great. And the one that we're going to be at, Bill, is happening in November. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So we decided that since the Donegans were coming back again, that we would go a little bit larger for this time, because I feel like with the amount of people here who do Rebel Finance School and the amount of people that they met the last time they did their famous pie tour of New Zealand, that the 50-seat Black Friday just wasn't going to cut it anymore. We had to do something a little bit larger. So we took some inspiration from economy, actually, and decided that we would do a little bit bigger. Yeah, shout out for economy. We decided that we wanted to do that sort of conference format. I basically just wanted the Donegans in front of more people. And so it started with them. So we booked a venue here in Christchurch. We're doing that on the 8th and 9th of November, 2026. And so that's locked and loaded, ready to go. And we actually debated about whether we would still run Black Friday as well, because that's at the end of November. But we decided that, we would do both and take advantage of having them here. And we hope that the community's big enough to do both events, but I believe it will be.
So how are you styling it? You described it to me as like a mix between economy and a TED Talk. Who are your speakers?
Yeah. So I guess I was really inspired by the venue. If you're aware of Christchurch's history, we suffered a devastating earthquake about 15 years ago. And whilst that was horrible, it has led to a brand new, almost like custom built city springing up, right? Because we had a lot of clean slate to work with, shall we say, in the central city. And so one of the buildings that's just opened about a year ago is a place called the Court Theatre. And that's a new build that replaces the original Court Theatre, which was a much loved institution in Christchurch. But this new court theatre, I ended up accidentally doing an architectural tour through the building because at the time, 5-year-old son dragged me, like, what are those people doing? Let's go, and dragged me into it. And we saw this space that they had available, which is the one that we've booked, and they use it for theatre sports. It holds 150 people, but I just loved the energy of that room, the way they configure it and they lay out the seating is that you have basically audience on 3 sides of the speaker. Instead of just talking to the front, they're interacting almost in the 360. And it's all down on the floor level. There's no stage, right? So it's all very intimate and quite sort of interactive feeling. And so I was quite inspired by that space, and I thought that that would be a fantastic opportunity to get into this brand new building and to use it. It's also got an incredible sort of atrium auditorium area out the front that we've got use of as well. I've got a pizza oven and a bar and a mezzanine floor that we can just hang out and connect with the people that we meet along the way. And so we're sort of hoping to do a bit of an economy vibe, but to bring in some of the community building from the Black Friday events and just give people more time in between speakers to sit and eat lunch together, to mingle and to chat and to hopefully meet people as well and start to build some of those connections with people as well as get some incredible content.
Yeah, a year ago, I wouldn't even have dreamt about going to New Zealand. So if anyone's listening and they ever had a desire to go to New Zealand, hang out with some FIRE people, this is a great opportunity. We will make sure we put the information in the show notes. Now, I'm curious about what type of audience you expect. Is it mostly Kiwis, maybe some people from Australia, maybe some US? Any sense of the mix of where people are coming from?
Yeah, I mean, originally I had assumed it was going to be mostly Kiwi. I sort of thought, oh, well, we'll do it for the locals. This is an opportunity for Kiwis to see some of the international speakers that they wouldn't have had a chance to see otherwise, unless they're willing to travel. But then the more that we've talked to people, I think there's going to be a bit of an Australian contingent there as well. We're really good mates with Rob over at Tribe Fire. He came to Black Friday last year and he's a fantastic guy. And so we've strategically aligned our events to just be weekend apart so that some of the speakers who are coming down from the Northern Hemisphere can do both. And then he's looking to bring a busload of his mates over as well. So we'll just continue. I did it the wrong way around. His event is first, and then he gets to come and enjoy our event off duty, right? Where I've got it the other way around. But I think there's going to be a fantastic week of FIRE for the people who are doing both. So it'll be great.
And who do you have coming to speak? We are fortunate to have been invited, but who else is coming?
Yeah, so we've got the Donegans, obviously, and you guys. Jordan is coming down as well, Dr. G. So super excited to have him attend. He attended Black Friday via Zoom last year and he was incredible. So super excited to be meeting him in the flesh. It's amazing. And we also have Jillian Johnsbury coming down.
Wow, all of our friends, Jackie. We're just going on tour here. The Donegans are the main, we're the warm-up band, I guess.
We love it. We love it. I'm hoping you have an amazing event. So this is the first year, right? So this is the inaugural year. Yeah, Bill and I both met at the inaugural year of economy. So it is special that you're doing this for the first time because you really don't know what to expect. So I love that you are spreading financial independence and the whole concept with your clients, your community, and really the larger world at these bigger events. So at this point, I know you pulled it together, came from modest means, went to college, but went through a divorce, got with a new partner, had a kid. So today, are you financially independent? Where are you in your personal life?
No, I wish. I'm very much stuck somewhere probably about the middle, right? So it's going to be a few years yet before I can be as lucky. To be fair, there's so many people who do Rebel Finance School and then they just say, oh my gosh, I crunched my numbers and I'm FIRE. This is amazing. And I'm like, oh, you know.
I know how you feel. Have you written your own resignation letter yet? I love this.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to.
But you know what I love about this, and I think where some of our listeners can draw from, is that you're in the boring middle. You haven't reached financial independence yet, but you're still enjoying the journey. You're doing these events. You're doing so many things in between. You're not just rushing to the finish line. So I commend you for that. And I feel like that's the best way to do it.
Part of it was we always used to joke, if we won lottery, we would pay the mortgage off for like our 6 best friends, right? Because otherwise, who are you going to hang out with and spend your days with when you don't have to work anymore? And I guess I took that same attitude into building the tribe here. I was like, the more we can build those relationships and meet those people, these are the people that I'm going to hang out with when I'm not working anymore. You know, those relationships take years to build, so we're starting now.
No, I commend you because I never in my wildest dreams 3 years ago when we started this podcasting journey for late starters, like yourself, actually, which is a issue all around the world. And the path is very similar. The stories getting there are different, but it connected us on opposite sides of the world just because we were willing to put our stories out there, trying to help the community. And then I can't imagine how many friends you have now. You've got a young child, you've got a husband, you're growing a business, and you're growing this culture in a massive way in New Zealand and bringing Americans down under. I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and I encourage people to grab onto your coattails and do the same thing in their communities.
Yeah, and it's been so much fun. And it's been amazing to me how we've said that New Zealand's a small population and that we're a small percentage of a small population. But it's amazing how many people have been able to find each other. And we've got 3 Choose Your FIRE groups now. Ruth is doing her group in Alexandra. We've got another one just starting in Taranaki area. So there's meetups sprouting up all over the country. And I'm so proud to see those guys meeting together, without me, right? It's not about me. And they're just meeting and getting together in their own way. So it's been fantastic to see that grow. It's just absolutely incredible, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, well, I'm your mid-journey, but life is a long marathon, and retirement is not the end. You've created a life in and outside of work that you can balance both for a long time, and enjoying the ride as you are doing and building community, that is the path to a really robust and full best life, I think.
Yeah, thank you. It's always a great day. Like, a lot of my accounting work is the traditional accounting work of people who have no clue what FIRE is. But on the days that I start to have conversations with people and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I know Rebel Finance School, I'm just like, yes, and that's us for the next couple of hours. So I love that. I can't see myself giving that away, even when I am FIRE. That can be the thing that I do to keep myself busy or to have more fun. I was super lucky that a lot of my friends are from that Black Friday community or from the Choose Your FIRE meetup here in Christchurch. So much so that my son told us at the dinner table the other night that he thinks he's going to retire from school soon. So.
Oh my goodness. We've got the students retiring from school now. That's like the earliest high ever.
You're 6, right? Like, you've got some stuff you need to learn first before you retire. But yeah, he's up with the lingo. He was actually super grumpy with me that I didn't let him get on stage at Black Friday and have his own keynote. He thought that that was part of the deal. So yeah.
Maybe he needs to be the MC at Kiwi FIRE.
He would do a fantastic job. He would.
Before we wrap up, I'm just curious about what you're trying to make sure he learns about money.
Yeah, that's such a good question. We've just started doing the spend jar, the invest jar, the give jar, and it's been really interesting, actually. It only took him 2 paydays to realize that he values his time more than money. I was kind of like, wow. And so he was negotiating with me. It was his birthday. We'd come home from a day out, and I said to him, look, mate, it's because we have a deal that his chores, he only has 3 things he has to do. It would only take 10 minutes to do all 3 of them. They need to be done on Sunday night before payday on Monday, right? And so we came home, we pulled up the driveway, and I said, oh, you haven't done the weeding yet, because one of his jobs is he has to do 10 minutes of weeding. I said, oh, you haven't done any weeding in the garden yet. You better do that. And he looked at the new birthday present that he had sat in the car next to him, and he was like, so if I just go play with my toys, I just won't get the money? And I'm like, hang on a second. But I think that that's the beginning of that sort of almost like counterculture thought or mindset, is that actually my time, is my freedom, is worth more. And so, yeah, even though I wasn't expecting that to kick in quite so quickly, it's been really interesting to watch.
Yeah, they are sponges at that age, and they are so impressionable. And so I just love to talk through, okay, maybe we didn't learn what we had hoped we would have learned about money growing up. So now that we have kids, including extended family, nieces, nephews, or whoever, what are we teaching them? They are learning a lot, even from the time that they are even toddlers.
Yeah, and I have to ask you too in that regard, because with your expertise and knowing that we're talking to a late starter audience, we're all late starters here on the call, what lessons have you learned that you would give to late starters to inspire them, give them tactics to get on their journey?
It all comes down to the execution, right? I am such a bookworm and I will read every book or every podcast or every blog about the topic, but it's not a knowledge problem, it's an action problem. I think most of us, it's fitness and health, most of us know that we need to eat less and move more. It's the doing it that is difficult, right? And so it's one thing that I feel really well placed to do in the accounting practices that we have. We're already a trusted advisor on your team. You already know us and like us and trust us, hopefully. And so taking this next step and holding some accountability with you to keep you on track is, I think, really helpful. And that's been really good for me as well. Like these guys in the FIRE community, Ruth is incredible at throwing the elbow in and saying, how's this going? Where are you with that? And just keeping you sort of on task and honest about the journey. And so I think, to steal a phrase, FIRE is better with friends. Like the more support that you have, the more accountability you have. And it's so much easier.
Yeah, one of our prior guests, when we talk about late starters, said the emphasis is not on late, it's on starting. It's really late starting. It's an action thing. It's a verb, and you've got to get up and keep moving and take action. I was in analysis paralysis for a year or more, read far too many books before I jumped in and just got going. So I really appreciate that word of advice, and I'll turn it back to Jackie if she has any closing thoughts.
No, I really appreciate you sharing whatever tips you had, because it sounds like you coach through a lot of financial independence people. And we title these interviews with people outside of the U.S. as Borderless FI, to say that there is no border, okay? Everything we talked about, there's either a U.S. equivalent or it's mindset stuff and behavior and things that happen in life that can happen anywhere. So it's just so fun to get the perspective of someone that is outside of the U.S. So I appreciate that. And we love that we connected with you and we knew we had to share your story. And this just makes it a lot of fun, Bill. We just love getting to know new people. And we cannot wait to see you in New Zealand.
I'm super excited. Yeah, I can't wait to meet you guys in the flesh. So thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to host you down here.
Yeah, so today we learned that our stories may be different, but the fundamental principles of the pursuit of financial independence and the math of the path to FI are universal around the world. Life happens, and we have to adapt and keep our eyes on the prize. All right, it's been another great show on Catching Up to FI, all the way from down under. Bronwyn, we really appreciate you being here. Always remember, it's never too late to start.
It's better late than never.
And it's always the right time to catch up to FI.
Thanks, Bronwyn. This has been awesome. We'll see you guys next week on Catching Up to FI.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. And our editor is Fritz Brazard. We love them and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to FI. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to FI. Cheers.